I'll say this as many times as I need to for people to get the message. Arm training is simple. It's not about hundreds of different exercises, angles, tempos, and rep ranges. It's about creating as much mechanical tension on the biceps and triceps as possible. Trying to do that while minimizing joint stress, assistance muscles, and ego lifting, and while training them as close to failure as possible and progressively adding resistance over time. That's it in a nutshell. And the guys with the greatest arm development all have relatively simple training protocols for them. It's only the guys with underwhelming physique development, and arms especially, that have this laundry list of exercises that they need to do. And even worse, the gimmicky exercise techniques to do so. I personally built my arms from under 12 inches flexed when I first started training to where they are now at their biggest, hitting that elusive 20-inch mark, fully pumped and fully flexed. And to be honest, I did it with very simple training. Barbell curls, dumbbell curls, V-bar press downs, skull crushers. These were the bread and butter movements in my arm training for years. Maybe some cable curls and some dumbbell extensions, really to work around any overuse issues or injuries. But the reality is, I attribute about 90% of my arm growth to just those 4 exercises alone. Now, obviously, I got very strong on these over the years. I first started barbell curling with just a 45-pound bar. Today, I regularly do 10 to 12 reps with 135 to 155 pounds. And it's that simple progression over time that you should be after if you want similar results. But now, let's talk about a key factor here for guys over the age of 35. The question is, does that change the game a bit? And the answer is, yes, it does. I turned 36 this year. I've been training since I'm 14 years old. So that means I've been through every phase of lifting, from a kid to a guy in his 20s, 30s, and now only 4 years away from 40. I'm not gonna lie, my approach to training, whether I want it to or not, needs to be a bit different at this stage. It's just as effective, but different. So let's talk about how I would approach building massive arms for guys also over the age of 35. The first thing I want to address is loading and progression. Now, as a general rule of thumb, for hypertrophy, you can get excellent results training near failure in anywhere from the 4 rep range to the 20 rep range. Now, there are a ton of practical applications that go way beyond this rule. But for guys over 35 specifically, I really like most of the training to be more in the 10 to 20 rep range for arms. The worst thing I can think of for a 35 plus year old bodybuilder is trying to beat weights that he used to use, especially on arms, when he was 20 years old in a low rep range. I mean, in my 20s, I used to do a ton of 4 to 6 rep sets on dumbbell curls, and I was using 75 to 80 pound dumbbells. I was doing skull crushers with 2+ plates aside. Now, did it build a lot of muscle? Yes, absolutely.
How about that?
And I wouldn't change what I did previously, but I also would never think to use that as my primary method to grow arms post 35 years of age. The simplest way to still make that same level of progress, but doing so with longevity and injury prevention in mind, is simply move the target rep range upwards. Now, where I used to train mostly with 75-pound dumbbells to be progressive, today I'm doing just 50-pound dumbbells to be progressive, but I'm doing so for 20+ reps. Progression is progression, regardless if that's in the 5 rep range or the 20 rep range. And for something like arms specifically, there's really no downside to tweaking your training this way, especially if it's warranted due to age, mileage, and wear and tear. It's not a cop-out. It's not thinking, oh, I'm getting older, I shouldn't train as hard. It's just a realization of aging and a smart caution that must go with it. And at this stage, it's not about taking chances, whereas the risk to reward ratio is no longer working in your favor. Risks that you could probably get away with in your 20s, doing heavy sets of 5 reps on arms. Now, the methodology is still the same. Progressive weights, always adding reps or load over time when you can. But we're doing it with longevity in mind here. I don't know about you, but I still have years of progress I'm trying to milk. So I want my training to be smart through all of these years. The next thing I want to discuss here is exercise selection. Now, I have my key movements, but here's the thing. There is no must-do exercise in bodybuilding. I've said this for years. And when it comes to arms, and especially guys who are either a bit older or have lots of lifting experience, a lot of the exercise selection comes down now to what your joints and ligaments agree with. For most guys, the number one issue that I deal with is elbow pain. For a lot of guys, that means skull crushers are just a no-go. Luckily, I've personally been blessed with some extremely durable elbows. Heavy skull crushers have been in my routine every week for over 20 years of lifting. But I also know guys who've just never been able to do them. And now if you have that mileage and wear and tear that most guys just naturally rack up in your mid-late 30s and on, you better be listening to what your body is telling you right now. For me, personally, I had to hang up free weight preacher curls of any variation a long time ago. Great movement, but my tendons just didn't like it, especially once I got past my early 30s. Luckily for me, I have plenty of other options, but I would never force any exercise that directly caused pain. It's just not worth the trade-off here. So now, instead of looking at this exercise as a mass builder or the best movement for biceps or triceps, I want you to look at exercises and ask yourself 3 things. First, ask yourself, can I load this movement safely and effectively? Second, can I progress on it long term? And third, can I do it pain-free? If your answer is yes to all 3 of these, then you've got yourself a staple exercise. If you answer no to any of them, it's time to move on. Last point I want to bring up here is going to be your volume and your frequency. There's a mentality in bodybuilding today that you want to do the max volume and the max frequency that you could handle to get the max results. And all things considered, if you could do that and sustain it for long periods of time, that's probably not a bad idea. But the problem comes from when you try to do that indefinitely, especially again for guys that have a decent amount of mileage on their frame. Now, me, for example, I spent years and years training arms at least twice per week. And I've had periods of training them as high as 3 and even 4 times per week. My joints and tendons, they handled that very well in my teens, and my body tolerated it throughout my 20s. Now at 36, I have to train them the least frequent that I have ever before. Or else, aches and pains and even injury risks, they just start to accumulate pretty quickly. Personally, I find that for me, anything less than 4 full rest days with the volume intensity that I train with, that'll lead to some type of overuse issues pretty quick. That means if I train arms on Monday, the earliest I'll train them again is Friday. But keep in mind here, I'm also much stronger than I was when I was younger. I could generate a lot more fatigue, I'm a much more skilled lifter, and I train much more intensely than I did when I was younger, simply because of the 1,000 hours of reps upon reps that I've done and the skill I've developed. So the point being here is that everything here is a guideline at best and not a hard rule. So you have to adjust your training based on your own unique situation. And while not everyone is going to have the same issues, the number one thing I see guys in their late 30s and on have, especially if they've been in the gym for years, or let's say they played sports, they've had physical lifestyles, even when it was just when they were younger, is most of these guys have racked up a ton of mileage and wear and tear. And that's always going to be the main thing we need to work around. Now, if we keep that in mind, there's tons of ways to still be progressive in the gym, and you can still build massive arms as a result. And if that's you, give some of these tips a try and report back to me how it works. And if you need hands-on help with your training and you're struggling to get those results, I have a private coaching program designed specifically for guys 35 plus who want to build muscle and burn fat. You'll be working with me directly, one-on-one, and this is completely customized to your needs. If you think you'd be a good fit and you want my help, send me an email at peter@oldschoolmassgain.com and we'll talk. But for now, if you want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.